We have with us Vice Chair Elaine Mendoza, members Laurie Bricker, Joe Hinton, Brenda Pavich, and is Heather still here?
She just went that way.
Okay.
They're boycotting our meeting.
We have a new member, a student member from Texas Tech in Lubbock, Heather Morris. There she is.
She had to make an entrance.
That was making an entrance.
Yes.
Yeah, she had to make an entrance.
And she's a member of the American Society for Public Administrators and National Council of University Research Administrators. Heather received a bachelor's degree in English and is currently pursuing a master's degree in public administration from Texas Tech. She replaces Trey Lewis, and welcome again, Heather.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's see. Welcome to all of you here in our audience and to our live audience on the internet. Welcome to you also. Since our last meeting on March the 23rd, the 81st legislative session has ended, as we all know, and we'll have a report later from McGregor about a number of legislative actions that affect higher education. Okay, agenda item 2, consideration of adopting minutes from the March 23rd, 2009 committee meeting. Members, any questions or comments?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Pavich, seconded by Ms. Bricker. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3, items for the July 2009 board agenda related to our committee. Item 3A is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to statutory 4-year review of degree mission programs, mission statements, and table of programs for the following institutions: Texas A&M University,
Thank you.
Texas A&M University Corpus Christi, and Texas A&M University Galveston. McGregor, can you lead us through these, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank
Texas A&M University is looking to reapprove its existing mission statement, as is Texas A&M University Galveston. Texas A&M University Corpus Christi has a minor revision or a reduction to its mission statement and merely gives a shorter explanation of their mission for those clarity of purpose, I believe, and for that reason I would recommend that these be adopted.
Members, any comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Ms. Bricker, seconded by Elaine. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3B is consideration of adopting the proposed mission statement and table of programs for Texas A&M University Central Texas and Texas A&M University San Antonio. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The items here are to approve, just as we have done for all of our universities when they first begin, the initial mission statement and table of programs. The table of programs were developed based upon the actual programs that are being offered at the institution at the present time. And therefore, any new programs will have to come forward in like manner to the existing institutions. The mission statements, as you can see, are fairly straightforward, as are the existing programs, so that you can look and see what baccalaureate and master's level programs are being offered. Anything beyond those that are in this initial table of programs will have to come back through the board, depending upon the rules, for approval, either through the board or through the agency staff. And I recommend approval of these mission statements and table of programs for A&M Central Texas and San Antonio.
Thank you, McGregor. Any questions or comments? You've heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Ms. Mendoza, seconded by Ms. Bricker. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 3C is the consideration of adopting the staff recommendation regarding the preliminary authority request. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 3 items for your consideration today. The first one at Tarleton State University for Rangeland Ecology and Management, which is a Step 2 doctoral cooperative program with Texas A&M University. Dr. Ben Wu from Texas A&M University and Dr. Sam Curl from Tarleton, I believe, are here to support the program should there be any questions. As a Step 2 cooperative, the A&M faculty will be working with students on the campuses at Tarleton and will be providing support to the program from the College Station campus or on location there in Stephenville. At Texas A&M International University, there are two programs, one a master's in communication sciences and disorders and one in dietetic studies. Both of these are at the preliminary level, and they will be moving forward, should you give your approval, to putting together complete briefings, including curriculum, faculty proposals, as well as a budget for these items, should you move them forward. And I recommend approval for these three items, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Hinton, second.
Second?
Second by Ms. Mendoza. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 3D is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to requests for new degree programs. Item 3D1 is a request from Stephen F. Austin State University to offer a Doctor of Philosophy degree with a major in school psychology. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This proposal is the final program approval for Stephen F. Austin to offer the PhD in school psychology. This is an area where there is a high demand based upon national figures. Texas has the lowest per student for student to psychologist, student to school psychologist ratio. I'll get it out eventually, in the nation. And as such, this program is one that will hopefully help to lower that gap and prepare professional students at the SFA to enter school psychology program and be successful in helping our students in the schools. This will be their third, I believe, PhD program, and we recommend approval of this program based upon the demand and based upon the level of expertise that has been demonstrated and based upon the recommendation of the site review team which conducted the visit.
That's great. I know how important it is to have school psychologists who speak Spanish, and I'm happy to see the plan to recruit underrepresented students, and I think it always helps students major in something when they see that they have a chance to go on further than that. Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Mendoza, seconded by Mr. Hinton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 3D2 is from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center at Dallas for authority to offer a Master of Science degree and Doctor of Philosophy degree with a major in cancer biology. McGregor, please explain this and give us your recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This program is for the Master and PhD in Cancer Biology, and with the advent of the major cancer initiative that the state has put forward with their bond indebtedness and creating the Cancer Council, the area of cancer research and specifically working in all aspects of cancer biology would allow students to be better prepared and to provide Texas with a stronger base of research-oriented students and research-oriented researchers to build upon for developing additional research projects in Texas with respect to cancer. This program is based upon a large area of expertise at the UT Southwestern Medical Center in cancer and cancer research. And based upon that, Madam Chair, we have the recommendation to approve the two programs and allow them to move forward with their project.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mr. Hinton, seconded by Ms. Bricker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 3D3 is from Texas State University San Marcos for authority to offer a Doctor of Philosophy degree with a major in criminal justice. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is to raise the number of doctoral programs in criminal justice from 1 to 2. Right now, Sam Houston State University, sister school to Texas State University, is in fact the only PhD in criminal justice. There are, however, 3 other similar programs in the state. Sorry, I lost track of where that was right now, but sorry. The other related programs are at Texas Southern Administration of Justice, Prairie View Juvenile Justice, and UT Dallas in criminology. So also, those are the only other similar programs beyond Sam Houston's PhD program in criminal justice. This program is also going to have the benefit of working with the nationally recognized program at Texas State in their geography and using geospatial information systems to help prepare better data analysis and recording of criminal justice activities and research. So from that perspective, they did take the recommendations from the site review team, which looked for trying to find ways to improve the area of excellence and to provide some uniqueness for the program. The area that they focused upon was on geospatial information systems, and with that recommendation, they felt like it would give a much stronger program for the students and would be able to focus the program in a way that would make it unique nationally. So from that perspective, and with the work that has gone into the program, both with the external reviewers and with members of the coordinating board staff, we do recommend approval of the Texas State University PhD in criminal justice.
Very interesting. Any comments, members? You've heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Ricker,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Hinton. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The University of Texas at San Antonio is asking to expand its existing Doctor of Education degree with a major in educational leadership via distance education. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This program is actually going to be face-to-face at a distance for the most part, with locations in Odessa and then across several locations in Uvalde, Del Rio, and or Eagle Pass, to be providing students in those areas with the opportunity for the doctoral degree in educational leadership. These sites, primarily, a distinction is made between the two sites, Odessa and then the Winter Garden area. And so with those two sites in operation, they should be able to extend additional students, up to 40 students in the Odessa program during the first 5 years, and 48 students in the Winter Garden area during the first 5 years. With the breadth of distance between locations available for education leadership in both West Texas and then that west of San Antonio region as well, out toward the border. These opportunities offer a great chance for students to get the EDD and proceed on into administrative positions in school districts, and also to provide UTSA with the opportunity to expand its operations and provide a greater reach to students in other areas of the state. And so for that reason, with the recommendation of the staff, we recommend approval of this program.
So important.
Yeah.
Dr. Davis, is this the first of many of these we're going to be seeing?
Most likely, yes.
Really important area. Any further comments? You've heard the staff recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms.
Second.
Mendoza, second by Ms. Ricker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item 3F is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to a request from North Central Texas College to hold a branch campus maintenance tax election in the Graham-Young County, Texas Independent School District. McGregor, I love these things.
Well, this is
Explain it to those who might not.
Fortunately, these don't come up very often. This is actually a situation where the Graham Independent School District was originally in the Ranger Junior College District, but then was requested and received permission to remove itself from Ranger Junior College District in the 79th Legislature. Currently, Graham ISD is not within the service area of any public community college. They have worked to develop a facility with grants from the Knowledge Base Foundation out of Graham, as well as the Graham Economic and Workforce or Economic Development Corporation, Economic Improvement Corporation, to rehabilitate a couple of buildings into potential facilities for a higher education center of some type. And what they are seeking now is with North Central Texas College, headquartered out of Cook County, they would like to try and expand enrollments for their existing programs and to establish a branch campus. North Central Texas College provided the notification to all institutions with 100 miles of Graham of the intent to establish a branch campus. No objections were raised. There is significant support from the local community, according to the North Central, and the basis of this is based upon obtaining sufficient signatures to allow the election to proceed forward, and the coordinating board is verifying that. The maximum amount of the rate would be 5 cents per 100, which they will determine what rate they're going to put forward before the election, and then we'll move forward with the election. Our position here is simply to either approve that they have met all of the necessary criteria to warrant the election before sending it back to the county and allowing them to conduct the election in a timely fashion. And we do recommend approval of this item and to allow them to have their election in their local community.
Right.
Question.
Question?
Yeah. the fact that they were in a community college district and then moved out of it, and then they're now just in a service area and not in a district, it seems like it's a tremendous disadvantage because they're capped at 5 cents, aren't they? And they're also restricted as to what they can do facility-wise to build out.
It depends on how they do it. The way they've done it so far is that they've used private funds to pay for the build out of the facilities. And so the branch campus is to pay for either facilities or for the maintenance of the existing facilities once the community college comes into the area again. So it depends on how it's operated as to whether or not it's an advantage not to be in a service area or a disadvantage. And it also depends on the level of external support that they receive as to whether or not the 5 cent cap on the amount of maintenance tax that can be raised is sufficient to help them cover their costs. So the issue of advantage or disadvantage is really going to depend on the level of support that the community provides on top of whatever the maintenance amount is.
And moving forward, like in 5 years, if they need more, can they reaffiliate with a taxing district of I mean, it just seems like it's very restrictive.
It would depend on one of two things. Potentially, the coordinating board could identify and put them back into another area if that was the goal, or the legislature could choose to put them back into a service area just as they withdrew them. And so, obviously, it just depends on what on what the will of the community is at the time, and what they feel is in the best interest for their students and the potential students in that area.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to this, but I hate the fact that we put community colleges in this kind of a pickle, and we don't give them the kind of support that they need. And, they're obviously finding the best avenue to continue to serve the students in their area. And I'm not objecting to that. I think, what they're doing is admirable. But they're going up against, a community to raise their taxes, which is exactly what an annexation does. And I just think that, we need to, hopefully in the near future, support community colleges. Joe, when you asked the question earlier about are we going to close the gaps, if we don't give the community colleges the kind of support they need to expand their facilities, to hire more professors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then, this is going to hinder that. And again, I'm not opposed to what this project is. I'm supportive of it. It's frustrating to me that we still don't have the kind of support for community college funding that we should have.
I think that's right. I see it in McLennan County Community College. They're always struggling. And there's always the issue of raising taxes, and that always creates problems. But there's no ratable flow of revenue coming into that school. And that's one of the things that really bothers them, because they never know from one time to another, what their financial position is going to be.
Exactly, and not unlike school districts and other four-year universities, they have unfunded mandates. Like House Bill 1 requires them to offer dual credit to the high schools, and they don't get any money for it, and it costs them money.
Did we request at one of our board meetings some consideration be given, and as I remember, a letter was written before the legislative session took hold about some sort of a ratable flow, formula type funding for community colleges? I remember we had some discussions about that, and I don't know what happened. Did it die here, or did it die in the legislature?
There is the contact hour formula is a formula, so it is, in terms of the number of credit hours that are or contact hours that are generated, there is a certain level of specificity and a certain level of projectability of how much money they're going to raise.
Is that for all the community colleges, or a select few, or
All of them.
all of them? Okay,
Yes.
good.
But those that aren't in a taxing district, that are in a service area, those individuals that either pay double for tuition or whatever the community college assesses, or those students that are in high school, like Katie, for example, that's in a service area, they pay whatever double tuition to the community college, and they're facing annexation, which would raise their taxes from 0 to whatever it is, 9 cents. I just wish that there were a way that we could convince the legislature to fund community colleges more equitably.
And I think that's what Joe's referring to in
Yeah.
some of our planning sessions. We've talked about the need for a statewide.
Yeah, we really do need to do that, because we've talked so many times about how important the community colleges are to our future. And so many kids are coming out of high school now and going to the community colleges that we just need to figure out a way to do better than what we've been doing, I think.
Well, Joe, I want you to get out there and go to all those counties out in West Texas and the Panhandle and get them to give us some money. Get all those people to agree. Or
But
the
all
few
it gets
people
back
that
to
are
$150 a barrel, it'll be
Yeah.
easier to do.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, let's see. I don't think we voted on this. Any more comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Hinton, seconded by Ms. Bricker. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 3G is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to authorize the chair of the Committee on Academic Excellence and Research to approve the 2008-2009 African American Museum Internship Report to be submitted to the Governor's Office and Legislative Budget Board by October 1st, 2009. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an item where approximately $94,000 is allocated to the coordinating board each year to pass through to the University of Texas at Dallas, who serves as the fiscal agent on a grant to the Dallas Museum, at which place they have established an African American Museum internship program. This program has been ongoing since 2003, I believe, since 2002. And these funds are used to support students who are interested in pursuing career in museum and in the museum studies area. For this program, we are supposed to receive a report that we pass on from the museum to the governor and the legislative budget board. In the past, we've had to work quite closely with the museum in order to get the report in a timely manner. And this year, we have received. We're continuing to work with them to get a report that we can use as the substance of the report to the governor and the legislative budget board. What we would recommend is perhaps instead of having the chair waiting to approve this, perhaps approving either myself or David to authorize the report to be forwarded to the governor and the LBB once it is received and approved at the staff level. And so our recommendation is to amend the existing proposal and allow the staff to approve the report once it's received.
Yeah, it's the timing on it is sometimes difficult, and I seem to recall, sort of dangling off something in Yosemite trying to approve this last time around. So
I think it'd be real fun to see your edits, though.
Anyway, now that you all have heard the discussion, do I have a motion to change this?
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to make the motion with the change. I move to amend Agenda Item 3G to authorize the Assistant Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Research to approve the 2008-2009 African American Museum Internship Report to be submitted to the Governor's Office and Legislative Budget Board by October 1st, 2009.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's see. That was, I didn't say it was moved by Ms. Payovich and seconded by Ms. Mendoza and passed. Thank you. Item 3H, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation relating to amendments to Chapter 5, Subchapter B, Section 524 of the Board Rules concerning role and mission, table of programs, and course inventories. And we have a supplement here. Like this, everybody have it? McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the major revision that we are working to move forward on for the way that we do business with preliminary authority and program approvals. The goal here is to provide institutions with the authority to approve at the baccalaureate and master's level for preliminary authority and program approval programs that have institutional and Board of Regents approval, that are non-doctoral, that are non-engineering, that are offered by a university or health-related institution, and everybody else, in terms of preliminary authority, would still have to come back through the regular process. So if it were an engineering program, if it were not at a health science center or a university, if it was in engineering, or if it were a doctoral program, they would still return through the regular process that we have had in place for the past many years. The difference is this would allow the institutions to respond more quickly to changing employment conditions, to changing demand from their community in terms of types of graduates that are needed, and would allow them to be more agile in terms of adjusting to the changing demands in the workforce. It would also give the institutions much more freedom to innovate, to try new things, and to try and be as responsive as possible. The opportunity is at a counterpoint of the coordinating board staff, where we have currently been spending significant amount of time and resources on both preliminary approval and program approval. This time would hopefully then be transferred over to where we would then be looking at program reviews of all levels, baccalaureate, master's, and doctoral programs, and would be taking more time to analyze how the existing programs are operating rather than serving as the gatekeeper to new programs. We would also be paying more attention to existing programs and whether or not they are low producing and high cost, and whether or not they are being able to support themselves, or whether or not they are pulling funds from other areas that might be better suited to support other programs toward excellence, rather than merely serving as a placeholder based upon past hirings. And so for that reason, there are a lot of opportunities to be gained here. And what we are giving up, in essence, is serving as the gatekeeper and moving to the other side and serving more as a quality control and measurement of excellence, and trying to move forward with the board's goals of closing the gaps in terms of looking at success and excellence, so that we know and have a better idea of how the existing programs are doing, and spend less of our time worrying about whether or not the community-based institutions know when and what programs they should be offering and for how long. So with that, the change that you're seeing based upon the supplementary agenda items is based upon a comment that was received from Texas State University. When we were drafting the original information, we inadvertently took off the appeals process to the coordinating board itself. With the existing programs, if an institution is denied, they may appeal the decision from the staff to the board itself. And when we rewrote the rule, we removed that. And we felt like when we got the comment that they were absolutely right and that we should have left that in there, and not just for the comment's sake, but because we felt like that's the appropriate thing to do. And so that's what the supplementary agenda item is to include that review back into the decision. And with that, Madam Chair and members, I'm certainly willing to answer any questions, or we do recommend approval of this change.
Members, have any comments? A big change.
It's streamlined.
This will be one of the most important changes, I think, if the board adopts it, that have been made in some time.
Yes.
I think one of the most important pieces of it is that it pushes the ownership and accountability to the campus level, which is where it should be. And it allows and encourages the regions, their leadership, to make those kinds of decisions, which I think they should. So I think it's great.
Well, and having served in this position for a little while, I think our staff, it would be great that for them to be able to involve themselves more in the quality control, striving for excellence area. And we just have a little staff, so you kids can't do all of this.
We're definitely going to do it on a rotational basis.
Yeah.
We're not going to try and
No.
do them all in one year.
I realize that. We won't have a complete report next year.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am. I hope we'll have a little time to get geared up. But we are working with the UEA, the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee, and the Graduate Education Advisory Committee on developing the standards for review of baccalaureate, master's, and doctoral programs. And I would thank those committees very much for all the help that they've provided in that area.
Yes. Yes,
Wonderful.
indeed.
Move to
And-
approve?
And I was just going to say, this is the kind of thinking you like to see coming out of your Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board staff. So thank you very much for thinking about this. Ms. Mendoza moves approval. Second?
An enthusiastic second.
An enthusiastic second.
Well,
from
mine
Ms.
was a real enthusiastic first, okay?
All in favor, enthusiastically in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Oh, God. A little levity.
Getting a little punchy here. Agenda item 3I is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation relating to amendments to Chapter 5, Subchapter C, Section 5.44, and new Section 5.52 of the Board Rules concerning approval of new academic programs and administrative changes at public universities, health-related institutions, and/or selected public colleges. McGregor?
Thank you very much. This is the second piece. This is the program approval. And as you can see, it adds at the bachelor's and master's level automatic approval if the conditions are met, including institutional governing board approval, compliance with the standards of new bachelor's and master's programs, certification of adequate funds, which is a statutory requirement, new costs less than $2 million. If they're greater than $2 million, then it would still have to come to the board for final approval. The program is non-engineering at a health-related or university, and we would also continue that there would have to be the 30-day comment period to allow for any objections from other institutions who felt like that there was too much duplication in the area. So from that perspective, the majority of the changes that we're looking at are strictly in terms of the automatic nature of this, that this is really going to be based upon the institution's perception of what is in demand and what is necessary for their institution to thrive and be competitive, as well as it is to be successful. And so from that perspective, we are focused on the bachelor's and master's level being automatic and the doctoral program not, as well as those programs which are based upon engineering or have a higher per dollar value. As you can see, the 552 does also explain that there will be an assessment of existing degree programs, and that the coordinating board staff shall develop the process for conducting the audit of quality, productivity, and effectiveness of existing bachelor's and master's programs. And so,
And we'll have a schedule of reporting those to the board.
yes, ma'am, we
We'll spend
will.
our time on that instead of this. Yeah.
Correct.
But this also includes all the nursing, all the high target sectors, would it not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I guess my only concern would be to make sure, and I'm trying to think of our accountability measures of diversity of student body and how they're recruiting. And of course, right now, it's within one of the metrics that we use to grant approval. I would hate for it to get lost in the wash. So how can we make sure that...
I think the accountability system still maintains that effect in terms of there may be additional degree programs that are added, but in terms of what the composition of those courses and programs looks like, that's still going to be subject to the review, and it's still going to be a factor that we will take into consideration when we're looking at and doing the review of existing degree programs. So whether they're added from this point forward or whether they're existing programs at this time, we'll still be looking at all of those factors, such as the demographics of the program and those type of issues.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll see these very programs, it'll just be in a different format.
Exactly.
Any further discussion or comments? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve?
Moved by Ms. Mendoza, second by Mr. Hinton. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I'm sure they're applauding out there over the webcast. Agenda item 3J is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation relating to amendments to Chapter 5, Subchapter D, Section 5.78 of Board Rules concerning operations of off-campus educational units of public senior colleges, universities, and health-related institutions. McGregor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is fairly straightforward. We have in the past had a rule that outlines the fact that for any institution to become independent after it has been serving as a system center on the supply-demand pathway model, that you would have to attain 3,500 full-time student equivalents for 4 semesters in order to attain independence. This has been reviewed and considered to be excessive, and that if an institution were to attain 3,500 full-time student equivalents for one semester, that would be sufficient to show that they would be sustainable and able to continue on as an independent entity. I think we all recognize that the legislature has changed that, I guess, the assumption with Texas A&M University of Central Texas, San Antonio, and University of North Texas at Dallas. And the standard that was used in those three cases was 1,000 students. And it was felt like this standard at the coordinating board needed to be maintained in order to show what we felt like was sustainable and ongoing, and so, but still have the opportunity to reduce it from 4 semesters to 1 so that an institution could attain that goal in a shorter period of time.
Sounds correct.
And we do recommend approval. I'm sorry.
I guess usually when institutions attain that sort of sufficient mass, they don't drop way down usually. Is that the thinking?
That's the thinking, yes, ma'am. And in recent years, we haven't had an institution get all the way to 3,500 before there was a legislative intervention to take them through.
The light bulb goes on. Okay, great. Good thing to do then. Any further discussion? Comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Bricker, seconded by Ms. Mendoza. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 3K is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation relating to amendments to Chapter 13, Subchapter G, Section 13.120 through 13.125, the repeal of Section 13.126 through 13.130, and new Sections 13.126 and 13.127 of the Board Rules concerning Research Development Fund. McGregor?
Thank you very much. The Research Development Fund has been in the process of being reviewed and revised. With the advent of House Bill 51, there will probably be further discussion as to the definitions and the uses of restricted research funds. In the meantime, what we have attempted to do is to put into the rules more explicitly how this process is handled at present and how we will use it moving forward, and to make a couple of definitional clarifications more than anything. There is not really a significant change to any of the ways in which the committee is operating. It is really just providing a clearer definition to the institutions and to the staff as to how this mechanism is going to operate. Basically, we bring in all of the institutions who are affected by the definition of restricted research and allow them to evaluate each other's purported restricted research activities and let them be the judges of who and what projects should be included in that calculation. Then, based upon their calculation, the funds tied to the restricted to the Research Development Fund are allocated. So it's basically the institutions being given the opportunity to police themselves and to provide the information and the appropriate data to be analyzed and incorporated into the distribution methodology. The review panel is brought in every summer and analyzed. We are looking at going with a 3-year, three fiscal years rolling average rather than a year-to-year. And what we are also looking at doing, there has been in the rules that the commissioner shall coordinate a selection of a team of independent auditors. The statute actually makes this a permissive situation, and from my perspective, and I think from the staff's perspective, the fact that this is a self-policing mechanism to begin with, where the universities are in fact, they are presenting the information to their peers are reviewing and approving them, that the need for an audit is not such that it would need to be done on an annual basis and would not need to require external auditors. This is an expense to which the institutions are not funded, so it is basically an unfunded mandate if we continue with the audit in the manner in which we've done it in the past. So the rule change to allow the commissioner to require an audit of the restricted research records rather than requiring it is an advantage to the institutions, and I believe does not establish any major negative consequences that could come about. And so we do recommend the revisions to Chapter 13, Subchapter G, Madam Chair.
Thank you, McGregor. Any comments? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Hinton, seconded by Ms. Mendoza. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item 3L is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to a request from the Texas A&M University System, Texas Southern University, the Texas State University System, and the University of Houston System to create 5 coordinated single-institution higher education centers in Northwest Houston. Gregor?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, it is very nice to be here today to listen to this agenda item and to be able to present it. Having worked with this issue in a previous life and having seen some of the challenges that these institutions faced trying to get together and figure out a good solution to this, I'm very pleased to recommend that the agenda item before you be approved. These 5 institutions, especially with the assistance of their respective system offices, have come together to basically distribute the courses and the degree programs that can be offered in Northwest Houston in such a way that all 5 of the institutions, Sam Houston State University, Prairie View A&M, University of Houston Downtown, University of Houston, and Texas Southern University all have a major stake in being supportive and successful in the Northwest Houston area. The location is the same as the proposal that came forward a couple of years ago, in that it is going to be at the HP Center that was recently purchased by Lone Star Community College, which is going to provide a very helpful single location from which most of these entities will be operating. The reason that we're going with 5 separate university centers is basically so that there is more effective advising and support for the individual students based upon the institution to which they're aligned. And so that you don't have one college advisor trying to advise for the programs of 5 different institutions, for the financial aid packages for 5 institutions, and those type of things, and hopefully to provide better services to the students that do enroll at these institutions. The only institution which will not be co-located there at the HP Center, at least in the beginning, is Prairie View A&M, which currently has a location on Student Airline near that area, and which they wish to continue at least at present. In the future, they may choose to come to the same location if they see that as an advantage to them and their students, but at this point in time, they are willing to stay where they are, and the other 4 entities will be in the same location. For that reason, ma'am, and with much gratitude and appreciation to all the parties involved, and Ed Hugetts and Ken Craycraft and Perry Moore, although Perry's interest in this is probably fleeting, but Ken and Ed certainly played a significant part, and Frank Ashley, Joanna Thomas Smith is here as well from Prairie View, and we thank all the participants involved for getting together and bringing this recommendation forward and helping us provide better services to students in Northwest Houston area. So thank you all very much. Madam Chair, we recommend approval of this item.
Thank you, McGregor. I also feel the same way you do. While I'm still in the same life, I wasn't chairman of the committee, but I'm still in the same life as 2 years ago, and I'm very grateful to have a second chance on this.
Ms. Ricker?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what to say other than this is a classic example of turning lemons into lemonade. Truly,
Sparkling lemonade.
truly, the winners are the students in the northwest part of Houston, the greater Houston area. I also think a great debt of thanks goes to this agency. And McGregor, I know you've worked really hard with all of the different institutions, and also, probably most importantly, to the communities themselves. I know that you all have had a tremendous amount of outreach to them to make sure that the direction you were going was the direction that they would support. And I can't say enough about how pleased I am that this project is finally, going to happen, and going to happen for the right reasons. I want to particularly thank Ed Hugetts and Ken Craycraft, John Antel at U of H, Dr. Joanna Thomas Smith for all of the hard work that you individually and your institutions did, and also your regents. I know that really it ended up being a matter of really communicating what worked best. Lone Star certainly stepped out there in purchasing the property, and I think this is a win-win, and I just want to congratulate all of you, all of the institutions. You know, when I think back on 2 years ago, and Joe, you and I have talked about this, it was probably one of the most volatile meetings that I'd seen on the coordinating board, certainly not when I was on the school board. Didn't hold a candle to that. But it really was one of a turf issue, and that should never happen. It really needs to be one of collaboration, of leadership, and all of you in the audience have certainly shown that, and I want to just extend my appreciation and congratulations to all of you.
Well said, Laurie.
I have another comment. You know, along those lines, Laura, you're so, I appreciate all of you articulating your gratitude and painting that picture of 2 years ago. Someone needs to document it, because I don't think anybody could have predicted where we'd end up with what's before us. It deserves documentation, and from a story perspective, so that we can use this in other communities. I'm sure this is not going to be the last time something like this happens, to where things want to happen, but the communication's not there, people aren't coming together, and it should be an example for all over the state on how things can get done, keeping the students first and foremost in mind. So if anybody can document that and use that as a boilerplate.
Sounds like a dissertation.
Yeah. Because it's so important to not lose that. And if you could describe the emotions that were happening at that time 2 years ago, from state leadership to all of y'all's constituencies, et cetera, to where we are today, no one would have believed this. So compliments to everybody who worked on this, staff and all of you, but we can't forget. This is a story not to forget, but to talk about and to make sure we all learn from. So thank y'all very much. Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Mendoza, seconded by Ms. Ricker. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Good conclusion. And congratulations to all of you, and thank you so much. Agenda item 3M is a report on the Norman Hackerman Advanced Research Program Merit Review. It's happening again. Well, this isn't our program, our RFP thing, is it?
No.
This is our review. Oh, yeah, I remember now. Okay. It's happening.
It's happened.
It's happened.
We are required by statute to have a merit review of the NHARP program, the Norman Hackerman Advanced Research Program. The program review panel included R. Allen Bowling, PhD, who's a TI Fellow and Manager of Research and Consortia for Analog Technology Development at TI in Dallas. David Hovda, PhD in Neurosurgery and Molecular and Medical Pharmacology at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. And Humphrey J. Maris, PhD, Professor of Physics at Brown University. These three individuals spent a very long stretch listening to constituents from the various PIs on the different grant programs, to staff, to administrators in the field, to legislators across the gamut, and did a review based upon the program and the outcomes from the program, and made several recommendations. The first being that the current allocation is insufficient, but that the need for review cycles was very good, that we were doing it on a 2-year basis, and doing the review on 2-year cycles, doing the pre-proposal, which we had kind of gotten away from, I think. The pre-proposal process basically said that the institutions had to narrow down the number of applications which would be sent on to the coordinating board, which would make it fairly difficult for some of the larger institutions with the number of proposals that they would receive. The acceptance of proposals from professors of all ranks, and we did look at that, but we've also looked at trying to include some advantage to having newer, younger professors, the assistant professors having a greater chance of getting these, simply because they're the ones least likely to get some of the larger federal grants. But that was the recommendation. And then the pre-screening at the university level, and notification about start dates and no-cost extensions. So from this, they did feel like it was a very worthwhile and successful program that should be continued. And based upon their evaluation, we agree with them and continue to support the program and the work that's done. I know that if there are any questions, Stacey Silverman's available to answer them, since we generally leave it in her hands. But we do recommend approval of the merit review.
Well, and it's good to have a good review, because this is
I'm sorry, this is an information item.
yeah, it's an information item. It's a good, it's a wonderful program. It's executed very well, and it's just a huge undertaking. We appreciate all the efforts that you all put into it. And when are we announcing today? When do we announce our? July 30th. July. Okay, good. All right, thank you. Now we have agenda item 4, update on Making Opportunity Affordable Engineering Articulation Fact Book. We have that here. We have the fact book here. We have a higher education consultant, Dr. Gary Hansen, retired senior research and policy analyst for the Institutional Studies and Policy Analysis Office of the University of Texas System. And he will update the committee on some of the key findings summarized in this report. Dr. Hansen?
Thank you very
Welcome.
much. The coordinating board received a grant from the Lumina Foundation to study the career paths of engineering students, those who started in 2-year and those who started in 4-year institution. And one of the major objectives of this research proposal and grant was to look at the cost, relative cost. If you ask the question, well, what do institutions spend in educating a student to earn an engineering degree, how much is that money? You might write that figure down as a guess. And then, does that figure differ by 2- and 4-year institutions? And so that's kind of the essence of the study. And so we looked at a cohort of students who started in fall 2002 and followed them for 6 years. We collected data on their enrollment history, financial support, effort in terms of semester credit hours and time to degree. We looked at the cost. And then we compared students who started at 2- and 4-year institutions. The key questions we were interested in were, how do these students differ with respect to their completion rates, their time and effort, their financial support, and so on. But particularly we were interested in, what do institutions spend on a student through that history? And it was particularly challenging because students attend multiple institutions. Nearly 2/3 of all the students in this cohort attended more than one institution. And so we collected the costs through the College Board's annual, not College Board, I'm sorry, the Higher Education Coordinating Board cost matrix that they collect annually from each of the institutions, and calculated an average cost per semester credit hour. So if a student was enrolled at 2 institutions simultaneously, for example, we would collect the cost and cost it out. And so this study was done by calculating costs at the individual student level, not an institution level. So because students attended multiple institutions, we were summing all the costs across these institutions. And then we also asked 2 questions related to cost. What does it cost to produce a single degree for the successful completers? And then what's the collective program cost for educating all the students who pursued engineering, who sat in the classroom? Some finished, some didn't. But we have a cost of educating students who don't finish, as well as those who do. So there's a 2-pronged approach here. The educational pipeline in the fall of 2002, we had 169,630 students who started that fall. 2/3 of those students started in 2-year community colleges. 1/3 roughly started in 4-year. To identify the engineering cohort, we did 2 things. We followed them for 6 years and said how many students actually earned an engineering degree, mechanical or any other. And then we also looked at how many of these students pursued engineering, whether or not they finished. So if they majored in engineering for 1 year, we identified them and we call them pass-through engineers. Students changed their majors, they passed through engineering, but they finished a degree or didn't finish a degree in some field other than engineering. So when we looked at these people, we at the end of the 6 years, we looked at where did they start, a 2-year or 4-year, where did they finish and what degree did they finish. And so, for example, the first line, we see that there were 85 students who started in a 2-year institution, got their degree in mechanical engineering from a 4-year institution. You see down towards the bottom the number of students who passed through and got a bachelor's degree or didn't. And so these are the 8 groups that we followed over 6 years and looked at all kinds of things. Well, here's kind of the bottom line very quickly. Over that 6 years, all the institutions they attended spent $424 million, a little over, on those 7,637 students. What did we get for that investment? Well, 3,582 didn't finish at all. We had 2,556 that actually got engineering degrees, and you can see the breakdown, mechanical and other. And there were 1,489 other degrees, a field bachelor's degree, and some might have been psychology, it might have been nursing, it could have been anything else. We just lumped them all together. So you can see the relative, a little over half of them earned a bachelor's degree. I think it's 47% did and 53%, 47% did not and 53% did. What did it cost? Well, when we look at the cost and average the cost of those students who finished and look at those who started in a 2-year, we see that the mechanical engineering programs around the state, keep in mind these 2-year students finished in a 4-year, and this is just their starting point. They started in a 2-year, they may have gone to multiple other 2- and 4-year institutions, but they ended up in a 4-year, got a mechanical engineering degree. The average cost when we costed that out across all the institutions they attended, it was $77,000. The other engineering program was slightly cheaper for people who started at 2-year, and the 4-year is somewhat more expensive, but not a lot. 4-year students who started at 4-year, graduated at a 4-year, the average cost was about $80,000. For mechanical, it's about $81,300 for other engineering, and the non-engineering degrees are somewhat cheaper. Now, when we ask the question, if we average those costs over all the students who sat in the classroom at any time and say, what's that average cost per degree produced, then you see the students who started at a 2-year have a substantially higher collective program cost of $145,000 for mechanical, $186,000 for other engineers, compared to the 4-year cost that's $112,000 and $120,000 respectively. So you might ask, where does that kind of difference come from? Well, part of the answer lies in the completion rate. We looked at the completion rate for those 1,966 students who started in a 2-year, ended in a 4-year with a bachelor's degree of some kind. 26% earned a bachelor's degree who started in a 2-year and at some time pursued an engineering degree and ended up in this cohort. 4.3% of those were mechanical, 11.6% another, and about 10% another engineering. 3/4 of them did not earn a bachelor's degree. 3 out of 4. If we look at the 4-year results in terms of completion rates, you see that more than 60% earned a bachelor's degree, 10% in mechanical, 30% in other engineering fields, and about 24% in a non-engineering field. A little less than 40% did not earn a degree compared to the almost 75% of students who started in 2-year. The other thing is the amount of time it takes. We looked at this in terms of did they graduate in 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years. And I think it's common knowledge that most engineering programs take about 5 years. For those students who started in a 4-year institution, 83% finished in 5 years or less. But if they started a 2-year, 2/3 of them didn't graduate until the 6th year. A third graduated in 5 or less, but most of them took that 6th year. If we look at their number of credits, the students who started in 2-year institutions took about 10 more credits than students who started in 4, 150 versus 140 roughly, and it varies a little bit by type of engineering program. We look at the financial support that these students had along the way. Engineering students are fairly well supported financially. I think you saw a presentation earlier this morning that may have shown a lower overall percent of students earning or receiving financial aid. But you can see that a little over half received grants and scholarships, a little less than half received a loan, and another nearly 1/4 received some other kinds of financial support. When we look at the kinds of support, interestingly enough, 2-year institutions, a greater percentage of them received grants and scholarship, but the average amount was somewhat lower. These average are the total dollars over 6 years, whether they went 4, 5, or 6. This is the total averaged across those categories of students. And so you can see 65% of the two-year students in mechanical engineering had grants and scholarship, but it's 14.5. 45% of the four-year mechanical engineers had grants, but they received nearly $19,000. I think you also heard this morning some information about student debt. On average, more than $20,000 in debt at the end of 6 years. I don't know if you can see the footnote of those students who did not receive degrees. They left the program without receiving a degree, and they were on average about $14,000 to $15,000 in debt. No degree, $15,000 in debt. That's it.
Madam Chair, if I may interject real quickly, Gary, that was brilliant. Within 5 minutes, just perfect time. I really got him to speed through it quickly. So I want to thank him for that. So.
Okay.
So now what?
Questions, if there are any? This is basically an information item.
Well, there are a lot of questions. Who's going to answer them?
Well, that's what we're working to do.
So
yeah.
where does this information go? What do we do with it? What are we concluding from it?
Part of this all came about from the Lumina Foundation grant, the Making Opportunity Affordable. And so what part of the focus of the grant was to look at ways to reduce the cost per degree in different fields, in all fields. But our focus for the first initial $150,000 Lumina grant was in mechanical engineering. And so what we had asked Gary to do was to focus his attention on engineering, and specifically mechanical engineering, which is why I broke it out, mechanical and then other engineering and then anything else. And so what we're trying to do is begin with this information and identify where the hitches are, and obviously trying to come from a two-year institution and go into mechanical engineering is a significant issue when you're in terms of preparation or in terms of cost, or there are a lot of potential issues there. And what we're trying to do with the Lumina grant is to remove one of the barriers in terms of the level of preparation and in terms of the sequencing of courses, so that students who start at a two-year institution and are interested in mechanical engineering will be taking basically the same curriculum at the same time that a student starting at a four-year institution in mechanical engineering would be taking, and have a similar curriculum, so that as it is now, there are times when a student at a two-year institution, because of the requirements that we have for taking the core curriculum, completing the core curriculum and then getting an associate's degree potentially, and then transferring to four-year university, a student who transfers to a four-year university with their core curriculum completed is out of sequence with a student who began in mechanical engineering at the institution, because the student who began at the four-year university has taken about 30 hours of the core curriculum as opposed to 42 coming from a community college. And so there's 12 hours that a student at the four-year university took in engineering or in preparation for engineering courses, a minimum of 12 hours really, that the community college student didn't take and will have to take before they can then sequence into junior level engineering courses.
Let me give a shortcut. I mean, that's how all of this feeds in, but what we're trying to achieve is by the end of the summer have X number of colleges of engineering, and we've got about 17 at the table now voluntarily, to come up with what amounts to a common set of courses that if you start at any community college in the state, every one of those colleges of engineering will say, if you complete these courses or any of the courses you complete, they will transfer to our College of Engineering. There will be a grade requirement with it, but they all agree, and it's a voluntary basis. Things are moving along very quickly. In fact, there was a meeting in Tyler.
Friday.
Mary and Kevin were there recently, which will actually talk about specific outcomes. People are talking about specific outcomes. We didn't ask them to do that. They're doing that. We think we may go further than we think. But if this happens, say if we just get 10 colleges of engineering to agree to this, that will amount to the equivalent of 500 articulation agreements in one. We're hoping we'll have more, but as many colleges of engineering as we can get to agree to this on a voluntary basis, it will say to community college students anywhere in the state, whether you're at Ranger or Cisco or Amarillo or El Paso, that if you take these courses in this list, you will be guaranteed an opportunity to pursue engineering at any one of these universities. And these guys are doing a great job working together. Mary's leading the effort. Kevin's working really co-doing it with her, and they're making great progress. And it's really, you would be impressed to see the engineering deans and people from the community colleges working together with the end of making this a process that's more transparent for students. I said I was going to make it shorter, but I didn't.
And so this is a big encouragement to them to do it when they see how difficult it is.
Well, and it gives us information. For example, one of the things Lumina wants to do is decrease the cost per degree.
Yeah.
And so part of what we're trying to do is to improve the number of transfers. How does one do that? I think this points to some things that isn't necessarily cheaper, at least as things are currently set up to go to a community college first. I think there's some areas that we're probably going to have to go into the data even further to pinpoint some areas. But in terms of the bigger picture, I think there's a good chance we're going to have an agreement ready in September for mechanical engineering. And with Gary's data and the success of that effort, we intend to go out to other areas of engineering and to other programs in the state as well. So we think great progress has been made in what, 4 months in terms of moving this forward, and without telling people they had to do it.
That's really great.
Lori's got a point, and then I'll go after.
Laura?
Yeah, just a comment. I'm not so sure that, and maybe this is just more anecdotal than anything else, but I'm not so sure that it's a negative thing that some of these students that were in a 2-year transferring to a 4-year took 6 years or more to graduate. I mean, I think that we need to be careful when we look at success rates, that we look at the fact that they did graduate rather than sometimes how long it takes. Because certainly in a technical field like engineering or any of the other technical fields, I'd rather see them take longer and graduate than drop out. So I think that the fact that maybe it slows them down a little, it looks like by the statistics that it maybe slows them down a little to go from 2-year to 4-year, it probably makes them more confident and more successful later on.
I think the concern is really based upon the number of semester credit hours attempted, because it's forcing them to take more hours
right.
because they're out of sequence. That's of concern rather than necessarily the time.
Right.
If they were right on the same number of credit hours and were just taking longer, I would agree with you. But I think in terms of if they're required to, if they're really taking more hours just to keep a full load for financial aid purposes and to be able to maintain their status because they have to fill in
Right.
while they're catching up to the native classes, that's the issue we're trying to address.
Right, and I understand that, and I also, I think that for these students to keep their major throughout 2 years and then into the 4-year is kind of miraculous as well.
Absolutely.
Because by then, most students have changed their majors a few times.
Well, and some of these have as well. But I think that you should know that your 6-year is sort of the standard rate, and so
Right.
it was only used in that context. And I think part of what Gary was saying, don't let me speak for you, but we've known that, some people are talking about graduating in 4 years, and we know that for the most part engineers take 5 because of the nature of the curriculum. But in a broader standpoint, if you can tie this back to the end of course funding, once again, given the way Texas funds, whether they're in engineering, whether they start at community college or university, we know from our data that if a student takes 6 years, the state is paying more for that student than they would if they graduate in 5 or 6, because the longer students in school, it's paying for more courses even though they may not have completed them. So that's a different kind of issue. We wish we had more data, but there's also the notion, as Heather brought up earlier and Gary mentioned and briefly, is that students leave with debt even when they haven't finished. And that's something that we need to take into account as well. The non-traditional students that we're concerned about, while they may take longer, we don't want to build up unnecessary debt for them either. So it's not just about the state costs, it's about the individual costs to the student.
Right. Elaine?
Well, I guess I'd also like some more, there's so many things you can infer from this data. What about the 3,600 students that don't graduate with any kind of bachelor's degree? What is being done in those first 2 years or 1 year, or whatever time point we lose them, to disenchant them, period? I mean, that's real concerning. And what are we going to do to delve into that, along with the 1,500 that aren't getting engineering degrees? What has happened there, and why are they disenchanted with the whole process as well? I would like to also take a look at the overlay of the demographics of the 7,600 students and what that population looks like. Because I think there's another story to be told with regards to the demographics, and if indeed the first 2 quintiles consume or really make up most of the student population, then I think if the 7,600 students are possibly majority out of those first 2 quintiles, what's happening to everybody else with regards to loans and cost and everything else? So, I mean, I think there's something real important to take a look at with regards to that.
There is much more detail. Some of the detail you've asked about are actually included in the complete report. I don't know if...
Yeah,
Well, it's right
the report was
here, but-
65 pages long, and I can give you the
Yeah.
1,000-foot.
Right, I know, but I think it's important, as you're communicating it in a public forum, that some of these things are highlighted and are stressed as well. You know, the challenge is we're just so woefully behind in engineers totally that no one should take apart from this that, darn, it's just too expensive to educate an engineer. Let's, give up.
No, and
The real
I'll take
purpose of
I
this
think we
is
need to be real careful about that. And
The real purpose, I think that's a really good point, because the real purpose is to, number one, increase the flow of students from community colleges, because as we have more students going there, we absolutely have to have far more transfer into universities than we have. Number two, we need far more engineers, period.
well, what's
And how do you, and we do have several institutions whose engineering schools are capped as well, and so.
And the
we
breadth
need-
of information that we put into this report was limited in part by the time constraints that we
I'm
put
sure.
placed on Dr. Hanson.
I'm
So
sure.
I'll take responsibility for some of the things that were omitted.
Well, I just think that, losing half of them just to no bachelor's degree at all is just very, very concerning. We got folks interested, to pursuing engineering in the technical fields, but then we totally lose them, period, is real concerning. We
Well,
need to figure that out.
Gary, you stopped with 6 years, right?
Yes, and I've done other studies where we went beyond 6 years, and quite honestly, there's a relatively small percent that graduate after 6 years. It varies by institution, anywhere from 5 to maybe at
So we
most
could-
another 10%, but it's pretty small. 6 years perhaps a large percentage.
Every subsequent year, and we periodically do a 10-year graduation rate, which says exactly
Well, the
what Gary
numbers,
did, about
but
10
his
to
point is the
12.
numbers aren't going to change very much.
That's right.
And I think that, we're trying to, outreach more to get elementary school kids, middle school kids interested in science and engineering. And this is showing that we're getting a lot of them. We just don't keep them. And there's just so much more to this data that is encouraging. We need to focus on and build strategies around.
And
Well,
I-
that's right, and this relates a lot to what we were talking about in our previous meeting. To close the gaps, here is a group of people who had an interest in a STEM area and who have a big loan, and they should be among the first that we try to recruit back into the system.
Yeah, for example, the money that we have in the new biennium, how much do we have that we can devote to this particular issue?
group.
And how do we intend on spending that money?
I will.
That's a good
That's-
question.
That's it.
That's one reason we wanted Gary to present this today, because we think, even though it's specifically mechanical and
Yeah.
engineering, it provides some broader context. In fact, it's interesting, and Susan might tell me if I'm wrong, but these numbers are not that dissimilar from our general graduation
Yes,
rates.
that's what struck me
Except
about
the engineering students are a little bit higher, so the
Bigger loan.
the 26% graduation rate for the community college students, if you look across all community college students, it's 26% have either graduated or is enrolled at a university. So that's a much higher graduation rate for those students who were in engineering at some point.
Yeah, true.
And then the 6-year graduation rate for the engineers was about 7 or 8 percentage points higher than for the overall population. So, but the numbers are similar, but that you show that, it attracts
Yeah,
better prepared students.
well, and I think that the reason the demographics needs to underpin all of this is because they will more than likely show they're the higher prepared represented groups that are not, we're not holding their interest, which what does that tell us about the underrepresented group? Okay.
But see, I'm also trying to remember, out of that $66 million that we discussed this morning, is in fact any of that money allocated toward anything like this? Or if not, what money do we have next biennium? Do we have that information now, or can we get it soon?
I think most of those dollars you saw came out of legislation that has to do with primarily college readiness
Okay.
and
Yeah,
that type of
that's-
activity.
There is
was-
one
that's-
specific math, science, and technology teacher preparation
Right.
academies, for example, that you might be able to.
I think there's
Yeah, that was
some money in there that can be redirected. When we have a hard, cold fact like this,
Yeah.
I think we have to jump on it and run.
I think
Yeah, because some of that money, when it says discretionary, what does that mean exactly?
Right.
And there may be, actually, the staff was, $2237 are quite restrictive, but when they looked at them further, they were able to find some, that within those restrictions, they were able to fund some projects following the freshman year rather than before. And this will be the first summer that those have been applied, but I think they have the potential of having some great effect on the real persistence once students get into school and carrying them to the next year. So there may be some elements like that within those dollars where you can look for helping maintain that interest. Ms. Mendoza.
Well, I don't know how the developmental ed is defined in the legislation, but there might be some aspects of being not ready for college that are related to this.
Along those lines, I know very tangentially, or a very tangible action, I should say, is aligning the courses to make sure that they do transfer and transfer well. There's a very intangible essence in that is professors have to accept two-year trained students moving into junior level classes with the same confidence and expectations that they do that those are not. And there's been data that shows that there's a stigma on that. So there's some intangible things that we need to get over as well.
And that's what we're hoping will occur based upon the meetings that happened last week, is that with the not only having the name of the course, but also having a description of the course and the outcomes that are expected from anyone who takes a course for the mechanical engineering program, that they are going to have these objectives for each of the classes.
So long as the deans push that down
Right.
to the classroom level, the professors and whatnot, that's where it really takes place.
And that's going to be a continuous process that has to
Absolutely.
happen. It's not just going to be a one-time email that gets sent out. It has to be a
That's right.
continuous process, and there also has to be a success shown from those students who are transferring in from the community college,
Yep.
that they are able to step
That's
in
right.
at the same level and do that.
Well, I don't know about our dollars just recently allocated, but we need to start now for the next session working on receiving dollars for retention and graduation. And I mean, to my mind, that's the most cost-efficient thing to do, to close the gaps by 2015. I'm not talking about everything else that needs to be done, but just that.
And we will be applying for a grant, a follow-up grant with Lumina, which they fund 11 states now, and they're going to reduce it to 5, but it would be for $500,000 over 4 years for a $2 million total, and this would be one of the key elements in that grant if approved.
Thank you, Dr. Hanson. Our next item is Agenda Item 5. It's a report on the Higher Education Policy Institute. Usually, Dr. Lee Holcomb reports to us. I see it's somebody else. Lee, would you like to introduce this new person to us, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Wendy Arisman is going to be making a few comments today to you in regards to learning outcomes in higher ed. And very excited that Wendy's come on board as of about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
6 weeks.
6 weeks ago. Wendy was previously a director of policy research at the Institute for Higher Education Policy in Washington, D.C. She had a number of years' experience there, working on a lot of the same issues that the Higher Education Policy Institute here is charged with. So she brings to the table a high degree of experience and expertise, national awareness, and she's from Texas, and so she has a particular interest in Texas and also particular expertise in Texas, how these issues relate in Texas as well. So, with no further ado, I'd like to let Wendy go ahead and begin speaking.
Thanks, Wendy. Welcome.
Thank
Welcome
you.
back to the promised land.
Yes, I'm very happy to be home.
Good. We're happy to have you.
Well, in my short time with the Higher Education Policy Institute, I have been looking at ways in which states use measures of student learning as indicators of institutional effectiveness. So this is particularly within the context of accountability or incentive funding policies. And the handout that has gone around shares some of the preliminary findings from my research. In the interest of time, I'm not going to cover all of those findings. I'd certainly be happy to answer questions later. I did just today want to touch on what I think are a few key points. First of all, I think it's important to note that nearly all states in their accountability systems use measures of student success, such as retention rates and graduation rates, as an indicator of the effectiveness of public colleges and universities, but many fewer use direct measures of student learning. It's much less common. When states do use measures of student learning, the most typical one is pass rates on certification and licensure exams. And these, of course, are only applicable to students who are in fields that have certification and licensure exams, so it's not representative of the student population as a whole. And what that says to me is that despite the extensive public conversation on measuring student learning outcomes, there hasn't been a whole lot of action to this point at the state level. Most of what's occurred has been within the context of things like the voluntary system of accountability. On the other hand, there are some states that are doing very interesting things. There's a number of examples in your handout, but I wanted to talk today just briefly about one particular state, which is Tennessee. And I find Tennessee particularly interesting because they were the first state to adopt an incentive funding system. They adopted it in 1979, and it's been operating ever since, so 30 years now. In this system, public colleges and universities earn points for achievement in areas such as persistence, student satisfaction, and student learning, and those points help determine the amount of incentive funding that the institution receives each year. Another interesting factor is that this incentive funding system has always used direct measures of student learning ever since it was initiated 30 years ago. And currently, measures related to student learning make up half of the possible points that institutions can earn. The way that they measure student learning is through exit exams for both general education and major fields. But these exams are low stakes for the students, so they don't have to pass them in order to graduate. They just have to take them. The scores are used primarily for the incentive funding system and also for institutional improvement. For the general education assessment, all graduating students in both associate's and bachelor's programs take a nationally normed general education exam that's selected by the institution from a set of exams the state agrees upon. Then scores on those exams are compared to national averages for peer institutions only. So community colleges are being compared to community colleges, research institutions to research institutions. The major field assessment is similar, but operates on a 5-year cycle. So in any given year, the graduating students from 20% of an institution's academic programs are assessed. And those assessments can be either nationally normed exams or locally developed ones, because there's certainly fields where nationally normed exams are not available or the faculty feel that the exams are not appropriate. If the institution uses locally developed exams, they have to do a pilot test so that they have baseline scores to make comparisons for the incentive funding in the future. Tennessee also, in this incentive funding system, awards points on several other areas that are related to improving student learning. colleges and universities can earn points based on the percentage of programs that they have that have been accredited by a recognized accrediting agency or that have undergone a quite rigorous external program review that includes bringing in someone from outside the state to conduct that review. Colleges and universities can also earn points by using assessment findings in the quality enhancement plan that they develop when they are going to be reaccredited by SACS. So these are really encouraging institutions to go beyond just these standardized measures and to develop other kinds of assessments and to use those assessments for program improvement. I think that Tennessee is an important case because in all of the conversation about measuring student learning that's occurred in the last few years, I haven't heard too often the fact that they've been around for 30 years doing this every year, and they seem to be very happy with the system. What I would like to do in the next stage of my research is to delve more deeply into how this came about and how it's been sustained over the years and what factors they feel have contributed to making it an effective system for them.
Thank you. Does their legislature use the reports on this often? Or?
You know, it's not clear how often the legislature uses the reports. I mean, the real focus is on the incentive funding, which right now can be up to 5.45% of each institution's base funding, depending on how many points they get. So all of their institutions participate, although it is an optional program. It's enough funding that they want to be
So
apart.
it's just on a point system, and the politics is more or less taken out of it?
I would say that it has been to some extent, in part perhaps because it's been around for so long. And they did spend 5 years piloting it before they instituted it in '79. So they started in '74. They review the point system every 5 years, and that would be the place where there's likely to be some politics involved, some decisions about whether or not to maintain the same point system or to move to a slightly different one. But it's been relatively consistent. It hasn't changed all that dramatically, especially not in the last 15 years or so.
Interesting. Members? Laura?
Yeah, what are the consequences? I've been interested in incentive funding for many years, and we really haven't. We have an accountability system, but there aren't any rewards or consequences that are meaningful. So in Tennessee, for example, what are the consequences if you don't have the student satisfaction or whatever? They just don't get money?
Right. It's entirely an incentive system. It doesn't have as I said, you don't even necessarily have to participate, although I think institutions don't make that decision because the opportunity to have that funding makes it worth their while.
Yeah, I'd like to see us move to a system that's more like the public school system where, for example, you're an exemplary school or you might even be low performing based on certain criteria. And I don't know how to get there with higher ed. We had as I recall, we had it broken down into different categories of universities, research-based, emerging research, whatever. It just seems like it would be more advantageous and more of a carrot in front of an institution if there were some real rewards and consequences. And I guess my other question is, has this moved a particular institution toward something that they didn't already have, or is the money enough to make a difference? Could it mean enough money to move an emerging research institution to Tier 1 status, for example?
I'm not sure that I could speculate on that, but Tennessee does feel that it has made some significant differences. When they started, they did not have a whole lot of programs that were accredited. Of course, the institutions were accredited, but the programs were not accredited, and they've had significant increase in the numbers of programs that have been accredited. The institutions have used that incentive funding to help pay for going through the accreditation process or the program review process. So that in and of itself, they believe, has led to increased quality in those programs.
Does it translate to attracting the kinds of professors and paying professors more money?
The institutions are free to use the money in any way that they want. So I think that they are going to use it differently depending on their missions. But I think that's part of what Tennessee is trying to do, is to maintain institutional autonomy while still achieving state goals in terms of student learning, persistence, and some of these other sometimes they have a particular goal for their 5-year cycle that they ask institutions to focus on.
Dr. Arisman, when you do your further study, could you look at that, look and see how their the performance measures have changed as a result over time? Or, yeah.
Actually, yes, I certainly can do that. That information is publicly available, and I'd be interested in talking to someone in Tennessee about some of the politics behind why those have changed.
I mean, I think that's really an important question to ask, because the question about who's accredited, say, individual programs. I mean, our board requires that certain programs get that specialized accreditation in many areas. We have not had the same type of issue in terms of whether institutions are accredited or not in Texas. Many of the things you stated, and I haven't looked at Tennessee for a number of years. I have a small green book in my office about Tennessee that was published a number of years ago, and many of those things are, I think, at the time were basic expectations that I think we already have in place, and it would be interesting to see, in fact, have they changed some of those in a way that would be meaningful in Texas. And as we do it, let's not forget that we do have an incentive dollars now finally in Texas, a small amount, but they do focus specifically on items. In fact, I was talking to McGregor the other day about needing to tie some of that in more directly to our accountability system, because they are in fact measures in our accountability system, and Susan's not here, but we need to make that connection more clear than what we have. I didn't hear, do they do anything in terms of what most people are talking about in terms of student learning and assessment? You talked about the low outcomes tests, low risk, low
Stakes.
Low stakes.
low stakes.
stakes,
I've never been. We always talk about high stakes. When you add low in front of it, it just worries me. But I think that's one thing that people are particularly interested in, is that aspect more than some of the other areas. And I know you know that many of our institutions have some of those things in place at their own local level, and how might those be brought together in a meaningful way from a statewide perspective. And she's also done some work with studying the Bologna project and their tuning efforts. And I think, interestingly enough, some of what they're talking about is tied into what the engineering teams have decided to do on their own. So we may be developing some of this in a meaningful way simply because the professors themselves thought it was important.
One thing that I do think is interesting about Tennessee's exams is that they have them as an exit exam. So it is not just a sample of students. It is all students for the general education exam, and it's all students majoring in whichever programs are being assessed in a given year for the major field. And some of the critiques of other systems have been that the sample size means that it may not be representative of the student body. When you do an exit exam, you're pretty sure that you've got a representative group.
So, some of you may not know that when developmental ed first started in Texas, the discussion started with TASP, and it was first conceived of as a rising junior test, which is essentially a general ed exam, and something that had existed in New Jersey and 2 or 3 other states.
South Dakota.
But it evolved so that it was only used as a TASP exam, as a rising junior exam, and for colleges of education. I think I'm getting a signal that it's maybe time to move on.
Well, we had fun while it lasted.
I was being subtle.
Thank you. Nice to have you here. Agenda item 6 is a discussion of staff review process for preliminary authority request and new degree program proposals. And we moved it to this point in the agenda because it's so much shorter than it would have been before we changed everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm glad we moved it to the back, though. There are relevant portions here in that we
Yes.
do have continuing efforts where we will use these same criteria when they're based in engineering, when they're greater than cost than $2 million, when they're not at a university or health science center. And so these same characteristics will come into play, and we will be using these also when we begin to go back and look at the review of existing programs.
Yes.
We'll be using a lot of these same items so that we can have a view of, we use these for determining whether or not they should have them, and now we can also use them for evaluating how they're being used and how effective the programs are. So from that perspective, and then if you look on the second page, the third page actually, under item B of the criteria, the additional items required for doctoral program requests, it also gives you plenty of information with regard to what the existing doctoral programs in the state cannot accommodate additional students, so that shows you a greater need for new programs if there is greater demand than is being met as well. And so all of these items are what we use when we're going through and evaluating either a program request or a preliminary authority request, and based upon the level of the program, which criteria we're basing them on is very important. And it just going on through, if you look to the next document in there where it's the top of it is standards for new baccalaureate and master's degree programs, it kind of lays it out in a little more bulleted fashion so that you can see more clearly what items are going to be looked at for the various baccalaureate and master's programs that we would be reviewing and approving. And obviously everything from the curriculum to the faculty resources, the library resources, the qualifications for the different types of programs at the baccalaureate or master's level. And then, Madam Chair, if I may move on to agenda item 7,
Please,
which is the discussion of new programs that we've reviewed in the past year. This is a chart that we put together to kind of show what activities we've undertaken based upon the different types of reviews that we conduct throughout a year. And so you'll see that for preliminary authority requests, we had looked at a total of 32. For degree program approvals, we looked at 108. Obviously, if you look at what the total was there, we approved 65 degree programs. We did not approve 18, and there are still 25 left pending. Typically, we're looking at a larger backlog in the doctoral programs, simply because when a doctoral program comes in and gets through the preliminary authority, and they will be looking at doing a site review. And so the site review typically takes some time to set up, as we're bringing in 3 experts from outside the state in the field for the degree program. And so getting those individuals lined up is somewhat challenging. And one of the areas where I think the staff, before I even came on board, has been doing a fantastic job of is identifying true experts and true standouts in the fields for which these degree programs are being sought, and bringing in the true experts in the field to be able to come in and say, yes, this program would move in the correct direction. Yes, it does have the necessary resources or the faculty to be able to be successful and to be competitive. And that is an area where we believe that we're really having a positive impact through the staff and through the work that we're doing, is making sure that we're bringing in the best people possible to not only approve degree programs, but to provide feedback to the programs to show where they can truly show excellence in a new degree program, and to show what areas they're going to need to focus attention on in order to build not just a new degree program, but to build an excellent degree program. And that is an area and a focus that the staff has been very much attempting to work on. And so you can see that the largest number of programs that we look at is the community and technical college programs, new and revised. Most of those are very quick because they're easy to evaluate. There's not a significant amount of time, but it's still a time crunch, because we still are trying to get these programs and these reviews turned around so that the institutions are not being held up, and that we are not keeping them from moving forward on projects, especially for those where it is a high demand program in a community that needs the new program to meet changing needs in their community, to meet changing workforce demands and those type of things. So from that perspective, the changes are not going to be significant when it comes to the doctoral level. We are going to continue doing the programmatic review, the program review and approval process as we have been. It's only at the baccalaureate and master's program that we'll be able to ease up on some of the preconceived and pre-approval process and look at it from the review process.
Members?
Sure.
Just the plan to recruit underrepresented students, did that not,
Yes, ma'am.
where is that?
Those will still be considered on the doctoral program.
But they're not going to be considered on the new baccalaureate and master's degree programs?
should be.
Yes, they should be.
Yes, ma'am.
And, I mean, especially if you're using this new format for the ones that don't meet the exception report, which would be engineering.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, well, that's a problem.
No, it is, and we are continuing to use,
I don't see it in here.
I agree.
Typically, it's under need.
Yeah.
I'm calling in reinforcements.
So you better get them.
No, actually, what you're looking at are the standards for new bachelor's and master's programs, and there's a form that the institutions fill out to request one, and that is included there, the plan for underrepresented students.
So how does this relate to?
And we also have a new doctoral
It seemed
form.
like that could get lost if it's not in the.
Yeah, it should always be here.
It's not one of the criteria in preliminary authority, but it is a part of the doctoral request form that was just revised recently, and institutions have to specifically state their plan for recruiting
But for the
underrepresented.
baccalaureate?
And it's in the application form for baccalaureate and master's programs, too. What we just showed you was the standards. It's a different document.
So the standards are one thing, the actual application process that we would review for every degree program at all levels does contain the question
plan.
about the diversity
Okay.
and the diversification of the program.
Okay, so that will still be coming to light for you all. And
Correct. We would see it every time for every program.
Okay. Just a quick question, if it's not a standard, that means that, are they filling this out just to fill it out, if you're not really judging it?
What they're filling out is not just the standard sheet which you're looking at. They're filling out an actual application. We're using the standards to evaluate.
That's my point.
The
If it's not a
application.
I mean, I
standard,
think it's clear
then
that
you're just filling it out
it
to
needs to
fill
be
it
a
out.
standard.
Yeah, it should, I think we ought to consider putting it
Okay.
under a standard. I don't think it has any weight without that.
Fair enough.
They said it better than I could.
I understood. We'll get it, we'll work on it. We'll bring it back
Does
to
that
you.
make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Karen.
Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any other comments, Laurie?
Yeah, on, well, it's not, the pages aren't numbered. On the community and technical college programs that were approved, not approved, pending, and total. Do those include the 3 community colleges that offer baccalaureate degrees?
They would be under the baccalaureate, the bachelor's programs above, not under the community technical programs. So
So
it
they
would
wouldn't
actually
be-
be counted under the bachelor's programs above for degree
I
programs.
see,
So, because they would go through the same process, preliminary authority and program approval,
I see.
which is
And
different than what the community colleges use.
I thought that we were going to get an update on those, the 3 community colleges that have the degree granting authority. And of each of the 3, one of them I think has 2, one has 1, and one has 1. So there are 4 total baccalaureates. BAT? So it's
Correct.
Yeah. Could we get that at some point soon, or
Would you like a verbal one now, or would you like a write-up?
you know, it doesn't have to be now, but I think that specifically when we look at the last legislative session and the attempts by one of the bills that was proposed to offer another baccalaureate and another one, I just would like some consistency of information.
And that's
all.
exactly what we're trying to do. We had proposed to have site visits at all 3 of the campuses
Right.
at the end of June, 1st of July, and we had submitted that to the 3 institutions, and all 3 of them came back and asked us if it wouldn't be possible for us to delay those until the fall, when there would be more students and faculty on campus, and when they felt like we could get a fuller representation of their programs. And so we are actually going to be pursuing that avenue at their request and delaying until probably mid-September.
You're just going to wait till I'm off the board before you come back with it, right?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Yes.
Your legacy will live on.
That's been our focus all along, delay until Lori gets off the, no,
Yeah.
but we are actually,
Find you.
I have no
legacy will
doubt.
live
You've already got my cell phone number, I mean, I'm out of.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we were pressing to do it in
we-
June, and but they asked, and then we went back and wanted to verify that they really wanted to wait till
Yeah.
September, and they really insisted that it was a much better time.
Correct.
Well, if I could ask my colleagues to please press on this, and in addition,
your back.
if you look under Roman numeral 1, under the standards for the new baccalaureate, the first one is need, showing job market need, student demand, and enrollment projections. So just guys. Keep that in mind.
And I just
Is
want to
that,
point out
is
that
that a subtle hint or?
No, it was an overt hint.
this has been,
There's no subtle about it.
this has been a constant one of the measures, and it is actually one of the more difficult items to get a handle on. And I don't think any institution ever submits a request where they will say there is no job market. And it's always interesting to find the job market subsequent to a degree.
There are some that have no job market.
Well, that's true. There are a few.
Yeah, if we'd majored in criminal justice, just think where we'd be. We might be, on the East Coast.
That's right.
PhD,
Nursing.
nice office.
Yeah,
Working out.
exactly.
Here we are instead.
Well, but for example, we approved an engineering degree, and there is a desperate need, but we have to go find these students to actually enroll in it. So kind of the reverse is true. There's a job market for the job, but in order to get the students into it, they're not just sitting around saying, gosh, I sure want to major in this particular field, versus some of the others that the community colleges have brought forward.
Interesting idea. Okay.
Well, I do think the same spirit that we've shown in our real change, a lot of that needs to go for the community colleges too, which we don't, normally have a way of addressing when we talk about baccalaureate programs and preliminary authority and so forth and so on. In other words, I would assume that since we are allowing institutions of higher education to assess their local situation and have more autonomy, that we might want to have that same spirit toward the community colleges.
They essentially have that. I mean, none of the academic programs come to us for approval.
Well, in this particular area that Lori's talking about.
At the baccalaureate level.
All right.
Yeah,
I mean, I
we've
think
talked
that
about that.
we're drilling down into the nitty gritty, and I don't think a philosophy or a policy ought to be the gateway. I think we've got to be a little more open than that.
And I think one of the things that we considered in looking at that is the limited number of baccalaureate programs that they had and the limited resources that they had in some areas, and the need to ensure that the quality and the resources available were sufficient for beginning a baccalaureate program.
There are some other things that do need to be discussed. I mean, there is a legislated mission for community colleges
Yes.
that they all share. And there also, it is legislated that certain community colleges will be able to offer BAT and up to a certain number. So there are some differences involved from a structural standpoint that have to be addressed.
Yes. And I just think we ought to be out in front of that instead of reactive. Is all I'm saying. Look at it and
Well,
Talk
I think
about it.
Was the state land, was it Florida or Georgia?
Florida's huge.
Yeah, Florida's doing it.
Yeah, I think what's important about the review in September is that you'll have experts from other states really looking at the programs themselves, addressing some of the real issues, some of whom I believe are involved in similar programs in their states. They are people from outside Texas, and they will be bringing their own judgment to bear on the programs and how they're performing.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Oh, when McGregor was saying earlier that when Ms. Bricker was asking about when we're going to get a report on BAT programs, and he said we were going to do one in June, but now we're going to do it in
program.
September.
Okay,
And so it's going to be a
see.
complete review, and I think a very good review of those programs. And
Including some experts. You're
Correct.
yes,
Oh, okay.
no, it's going to be external experts.
I didn't realize that. Well, that's
Yeah.
great.
And the three people that we get are going to do all three of the locations, the
Okay.
Midland, Brazosport, and South Texas.
Right.
And so that there's a consistency across all of the institutions with the outside experts.
And of course, I'm interested in it from, although only in the most limited way that has been defined in the literature the current literature on the subject of BATs, in how it might help us in closing the gaps. And we have to act pretty soon if it's going to. So, all right, where are we now? That was just simply discussion. Moving on to you ready to move on to item 8, McGregor?
Absolutely.
Okay. we're going to discuss the programmatic aspects of funding items on the Agency Operations Committee agenda. Not an action item, but McGregor's going to walk us through these things.
Exactly. We actually have these several programs for which we are going to the AOC committee for approval for the funding. The Family Practice Residency Program has been in existence for a good while and provides the residency training for our medical students to get the necessary specializations that they have. The Family Practice Residency Program, there are 29 programs in every region of the state, and each program funds up to about $14,000 per resident, and so the current level of funding would support 700 residents. And so it's a very significant program in terms of what we can do and how we can move forward on that. And so from that perspective, we're definitely seeing some advantages with the legislature putting more funds in there. In terms of, going back and forth, the primary care residency program saw a little slip in terms of funding, but again, it is based upon the residency programs. There is also the rural and public health rotations, which is part of the family practice residency programs, which allow students to take a 1-month rotation in a rural area to try and encourage them to participate and to move to a rural area for practice when they graduate. The graduate medical education program is for the private, non-public university health science, or non-public, in other words, private, independent, thank you, hospitals and programs. And it's a much smaller program and has been reduced based upon increases in other areas of the program and based upon the eligibility changes for the program as well. And the voice you hear in the background is a real voice. It's actually Dr. Silverman chiming in when she knows I'm stumped. So moving on, we have the Joint Admission Medical Program, which is our combined undergraduate and graduate medical program, which helps students who are underrepresented in the medical schools, primarily by low socioeconomic status, and helps them by giving them additional tutoring and support and mentoring while they're at undergraduate to prepare them to go on to medical school and to succeed on the MCAT as well as to succeed in medical school. And that program actually got an increase in funding this year, going from approximately $5.6 million in 08-09 to $10.6 million in 10 and 11. So we got about a 100% increase in a tough fiscal year, which speaks well for the program and speaks well for the level of advocacy that is provided on behalf by the institutions involved, as well as by the students that have participated so far. Those are the primary areas. The other two programs have lost funding since the 2003 session, the Residence Physician Compensation Program and the Family Practice Residency Pilot Project. So those are the primary programs, Madam Chair. If there are questions about that, I will probably need to bring up the experts and let them respond.
I might ask Stacy, just, do we have any plans starting now to try to increase the funding on the Hackerman program for the next go-round, the next legislative session?
We don't have any funds, or we don't have any plans at this point, but certainly you can direct us to do so.
Okay.
And you're segueing nicely into your next agenda item.
Yeah. Well, that's an area that needs a lot of advocacy, that hasn't had, in my opinion, the advocacy it needs from our board. And I would just like to raise it up as something that needs a lot of consideration and interest from board members.
And Madam Chair, in looking over to my right and seeing Dr. Hetzler's glare at me, I neglected to talk about the Perkins Fund. But the Carl D. Perkins funds are also going to be going forward.
I was glaring at you, and you didn't say anything about the bachelor's.
Sorry, I thought it was natural.
Touche.
That was good.
In terms of the Carl D. Perkins funds, we have several different areas of funding that we'll be bringing forward. The basic grant, which is allocated based upon the number and type of students in the vocational and technical programs at community colleges, distributed by formula. The basic grant reserve. According to the original agenda item, we had set aside a $2 million reserve to potentially pay for some priority items. Since we did not get the reallocation of Perkins funds to the 70-30 or 60-40 split, which we had sought, and it is remaining at the 70-30, we decided that it would be better to, rather than holding out that $2 million for priorities, to go ahead and put that through the initial formula allocation to try and keep some of the institutions from losing even more than they had previously. The $364,000 from the basic reserve grant, basic grant reserve, is to hold harmless about 5 to 7 institutions which saw a greater than 20% loss year to year in their funding through the basic grant formula, based upon either a reduction in the number of vocational technical students or a realignment of the calculations for how those funds are allocated across all institutions. So they may not have declined in terms of their actual number of students or vocational students, but compared to all other students, they may have seen a decline, so their total percentage of the pie was reduced. The $364,000 was intended to keep them at a 20% or less hold harmless. State leadership will be used to fund major projects across the state, and they will be based upon competitive grants. Of that, about 80,000, 40,000? 220,000 will be sought from the coordinating board staff to use to fund projects and to pay for staff internal to the agency, which is actually a significant reduction year to year from what we had asked for last year of, I think, around 330,000? 492,000. So less than 50% of what we asked last year we're going to ask for in this coming year, based upon some savings that we were able to achieve in lowering the amount of our basic grant admin and in the terms of the cost of some of the travel that we were doing. So we are reducing that state leadership grant. State administration goes to pay for our own expenses internally. The non-traditional leadership goes to pay for increasing non-traditional students, especially for students, females and minorities in engineering. This past year, we tied the non-traditional leadership funding with the engineering summer program and used combined funds to increase the number of females coming to the summer program in engineering across the state, and using those funds in that manner. And then Tech Prep is spread out across the 26 Tech Prep consortia and is allocated, again, based upon the number of students that they have involved in their programs, and is distributed through the formula process. So, sorry, I felt like the $36 million that we get through Perkins was worth a little bit more than a brief overview, so I wanted to give you that. Any questions from those?
Any questions, board members? Okay. Moving on then to item 9, discussion of legislative actions that affect higher education.
Dr. Lemoyne. And I'm actually going to defer to Dr. Lemoyne on this.
Okay. Well, thank you, and I'll try to be brief. McGregor's asked me to give a brief summary of 5 pieces of legislation that will have quite an impact on higher education and or the offering of degree programs around the state. The first one is House Bill 51, which is also sort of known as the National Research University Initiative. This is a big bill. It establishes several programs to enhance and maintain excellence at state universities. It also provides a mechanism for incentive funding to assist public research universities and emerging research universities to achieve national research status. The legislation creates 5 programs in particular. One of them is the University Funding for Excellence in Specific Programs and Fields, which would provide incentive funding to general academic institutions that are not state colleges, research universities, or emerging research universities. It's actually two programs. The first one, the awards would be based on an institution's demonstrated commitment to developing or improving the quality of an existing program. And the second one would be institutions would become eligible for a one-time award for a program that has already achieved national excellence, and there would be an application process for that. The coordinating board staff are already in the process of writing rules related to this program. The second one is the Research University Development Fund. These funds would be awarded to research and emerging research universities based on research expenditures. And part of the legislation requires the coordinating board to conduct a study to define research expenditures to be used for this program. The next one is the Performance Incentive Funding. This program would be awarded to general academic institutions that are not state colleges, and it would be based on various measures such as number of degrees awarded to at-risk students, number of degrees awarded to students in STEM fields, nursing fields, and other high-need fields. The third program is called the Performance Incentive Funding, and this would be awarded to general academic institutions that are not state colleges. Excuse me, I just said that.
Yeah.
I just described that one. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay.
The fourth one is the Texas Research Incentive Program. That one would provide matching funds from the state to emerging research universities only, based on how much an institution raises in private gifts and endowments to enhance research activities at the institution. And the last one of the 5 programs is the National Research University Fund. That one would be awarded to emerging research institutions only as well, based on the institution meeting benchmarks in a number of areas, such as the amount of restricted research expenditures, the number of PhDs awarded annually, the quality of the entering first-year class, quality of graduate programs, membership in certain organizations such as the Association of Research Libraries, Phi Beta Kappa, and other equivalent national recognition. Funding for this last program is dependent on the passage of a constitutional amendment, which will take place later this fall. In addition to the programs that I've just described, House Bill 51 directs research and emerging research universities to submit a long-term strategic plan to the coordinating board on how they plan to achieve or enhance their recognition as national research universities. It also directs the coordinating board to do 2 studies. One of them I've already described, which is a study on research expenditures, and the second one, this is not a coordinating board study. This is a study of the interim select committee, the select interim committee, and that will be a study on technology research data collection. And the last thing that the legislation requires is that the coordinating board review the institutional groupings every 10 years.
And if I may, in terms of HB 51, one of the things that we are going to do is going to be to work directly with the institutions and have them assisting us in developing the new models by which we're going to be incorporating all of these different programs, basically, that we're responsible for. And so Susan Brown's group and our group and Julie Laredo's group, and as well as business services, are going to be working together to try and work with the institutions and their leadership to identify the best ways for us to incorporate all of these myriad programs into a workable format, and to ensure that we do get their feedback before we charge forward. Thank you.
Will we have any opportunity to look at the wording for the constitutional amendment, or how does that happen?
The constitutional amendment that it was established by the SJR, by the Senate Joint Resolution.
It's already written.
And so the language is already explicit. Okay. It will just go automatically into the November ballot.
All right.
There are some things associated with this bill that just aren't clear at this point in terms of at what time should gifts be received. when do they count, when do they not count? There's some issues about when the money's available that need to be clarified in terms of the dollars that don't go through the constitutional amendment. And there's going to be some discussions. There have already been some staff discussions about clarifying some of those issues. And there are things that we need to talk with the institutions about when that meeting happens that McGregor's going to arrange with Susan.
I think Susan Brown, did you want to say something, Susan?
No, that's all right.
Are you sure?
Covered it.
Thank you.
Okay, or now we're going to hear about 175.
Sure. Senate Bill 175, also known as the Top 10% Bill, relates to the automatic admission of undergraduate students to certain general academic teaching institutions. The legislation requires an institution to admit an applicant as an undergraduate student if the applicant graduated with a grade point average in the top 10% of his or her class in one of the 2 school years preceding the academic year of admission. The applicant has successfully completed the recommended or advanced high school curriculum or another curriculum equivalent in content, earned at least a 1,500 on the ACT, or satisfied ACT's College Readiness Benchmarks Assessment. UT Austin is not required to accept automatic admission students in excess of the number needed to fill 75% of their first-time resident enrollment, undergraduate enrollment. The legislation also requires institutions to accept as transfer students those that have completed the core curriculum at a public or private lower division institution with at least a 2.5 GPA. The legislation also establishes a scholarship program to facilitate enrollment, though that scholarship program I don't think has been funded.
I have a question about that. How in the world is UT going to do that? Is it going to be by who submits first? If I'm in the top 10% and you're in the top 10% and you submit an application before I do, is that how it works? Or is it, or do they then kind of delineate and look at all the different factors? Also, do they fill up only 75% of the business school and 75% of liberal arts and 75% of architecture?
Those are good questions, and I think they've yet to be worked out.
That's what I thought.
Oh, they're going to have so much fun doing that.
And then that doesn't count for the 10% out of state on top of that.
That's right. It's only for resident students. You're right.
Right. But, so it's top 10% is 75% plus, or is it 75%?
Yes, 75% of the first-time resident undergraduate
Right.
enrollment.
And then 10% out of state, so that's 85%. So 15% they're going to look at a more of a holistic approach for admissions.
I knew Susan would want to speak.
I would, you know me. They have actually said, UT has to designate whether it's going to be 8%, 7%, what percentage that's going to be to allow in. And then, so then it's not a first come, first serve. So instead of top 10%, UT is allowed to set it at 8% or 7% or whatever number they think that is going to be to get them
Oh, I see,
into it.
until they get to the 75%.
Right.
But that means they can't admit until the deadline, because they won't know that. Like if I'm top 5%.
They have a deadline pretty early. I think they're
End of
February or
January
something
or
like
end of
that, early
February,
February. So their deadline's pretty early.
They do have to inform the school districts.
They have to inform the school districts the year before what it's going to be.
And they don't know if it's within each college either. how they're
I
gonna
don't
do that
believe it
yet.
has to be
Yeah.
within each
The
college.
legislation doesn't address it, and
Doesn't
UT
say.
has not applied the top 10%, at least in recent years, to the College of Engineering or the business school.
Business or engineering.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
House Bill 2504. That one requires a public institution of higher education to make available to the public on its website certain course information, including things like the syllabus for each course, the faculty vita for those who are teaching the courses, and the departmental budget, if available, from which a course would come,
They won't be available.
and student course evaluations. It also requires the coordinating board to establish uniform standards for publishing cost of attendance information. It directs the coordinating board to set forth requirements for institutions to provide information about student financial aid opportunities as well. And it also, lastly, directs the coordinating board to develop and provide on its website a tool for calculating an estimated net cost of attendance of a full-time, first-time entering student. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Susan, that tool is being developed right now. It's currently in development.
It is.
That's what I thought. Any questions about that? No? Okay, I'll move on to Senate Bill 956. This one creates the University of North Texas at Dallas College of Law. Specifically, it permits the UNT system to administer a College of Law until the University of Texas at Dallas has been in operation as a freestanding institution for 5 years, after which time the College of Law would transfer to UNT Dallas. As such, the College of Law, standing as a standalone institution for that period, would be treated as an institution of higher education eligible for formula funding and everything else. The bill also requires the coordinating board to prepare a feasibility study by June 2010 to determine the actions the UNT system must take to obtain accreditation of the law school. And lastly, the coordinating board will have to conduct a study to examine the need for and feasibility for establishing a public law school in areas of the state where a law school is not located, including the Texas-Mexico border region. That one is due November 1st, 2010. We've already recently updated the Projecting the Needs study for legal education from 2008, and so we'll be using that as a starting point for this report. Any questions about that one? Okay. The next one, second to last one, Senate Bill 98. That permits the University of Texas system to operate the University of Texas Health Science Center, South Texas, with its main campus and administrative offices in Cameron County. The Health Science Center, according to the legislation, consists of a medical school as well as other health and health-related degree programs. The legislation also provides for a provision of having additional facilities to deliver health-related programs in many other South Texas counties. Funding for the standalone Health Science Center will not be provided until 2015. Any questions on that one? Okay. And then the last one, House Bill 4149. This one, and I believe Susan Brown's group is working on this one already, directs the coordinating board to conduct a study to identify achievable cost-saving measures in the management and operation of institutions of higher education. The study is due January 31st, 2011, so we have about a year and a half to do that, and it has to include recommendations concerning cost-saving measures that are achievable and an estimate of the amount of money that would be saved during a 5-year period through the implementation of the recommendation. The legislation also directs the coordinating board to conduct a study and recommend policies regarding the use and availability of electronic textbooks in higher education. That concludes my report.
I have a question on that study. Which committee will that go through?
For the cost savings? Or
Yeah.
I think through strategic planning, because Susan Brown's group is doing that, right?
I believe that Susan, at this point in time, is going to be heading that one up, so I'll defer to her as always.
Susan, if y'all are doing the study, won't it be under strategic planning?
It'll be under Strategic Planning Committee.
Glad we got that on record.
So that'll come to the committee when you're.
We will probably bring
Bring
it
up
to
the
the committee on multiple times as far as what all we're looking at. We're also going to be bringing in the institutions to talk to them. Looking at things, we'll probably be doing a survey
Right.
of the institutions, because I'm sure a lot of them are already looking at cost savings measures, and we might as well get those on the table first. So we'll probably start with that one.
What is the budget?
Zero. It came in with zero money.
That's typical.
Yeah, it's one of those unfunded mandate things.
What do we think we'll spend? We don't.
Oh,
We don't.
we haven't had time
Not
for
a
the dust
question
to
for
clear.
today. Okay. All right.
Dust has to clear a little
Cost
bit.
save, that's for sure.
Right.
There's actually,
Now, are we the one? But we are the ones that are paying for it. The institutions or no other entity chips in financially for this study. Okay. Okay.
out of my budget.
I think
All right.
maybe UNT ought to contribute something. Sorry, that was not appropriate.
You said that out loud.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
All righty, and now, McGregor, I guess you're going to talk to us about the
Yes, ma'am.
things you're thinking about for consolidating or eliminating reporting for institutions of higher ed.
Indeed, one of the things that has been a favorite of mine a couple lives ago was looking for ways to reduce reporting, and Dr. Potter over there certainly has been involved in more than a few of those efforts, and will continue to be, I'm hopeful. But we are going to be looking at continuing the effort that it was begun a couple sessions ago to identify all the reports and to begin to parse down to the individual data point from each of those reports so that we can tell what individual pieces of data we're collecting from every report and begin to look at ways that we can consolidate that reporting and to eliminate duplicative reporting. I know that a couple years ago there was a very large push by the Council of Public University Presidents and Chancellors to put some of that information together, and I'm not sure what the final status was on it, but we didn't quite get everything finalized to be able to do that. And so we're going to actually be taking another look at how we can try and consolidate some of the reporting, eliminate any duplication that's ongoing, and also working with Susan's group on the CDM reports to ensure that whatever data we're collecting as few times as possible in order to be able to do the evaluations we need.
And let me add, and if nothing else, because we have staff who may not know this, is we have a data collection committee. And one of the purposes of the committee is when surveys are conducted, various studies are conducted, that they have to go through the data collection committee to make sure we're not collecting data that we already have. And we've been doing that for a number of years. In fact, this is one area where the auditors and the controller's office both have commended us for doing that. So there's a great deal of data that some committees, in fact, want to collect that we can get another way. And we try to do that whenever possible.
And are we also looking at consolidating some of our own bigger reports, like institutional effectiveness and the accountability system? And is there going to be an opportunity for any of that?
A lot of those are collected through the CDM reports. In other words, the accountability system, all of the data that is used in the accountability system comes from the CDM reports, the only exceptions being those that are self-reported by the institution that they're using for kind of additional data points that they themselves add to the report.
At their request.
At their request, correct, not at ours. In terms of the institutional effectiveness, those also are done through existing data that we collect from the institutions through the CVM reports, and so we don't have to collect individually each institution's programmatic activities in order to be able to prepare the institutional effectiveness report. However, there are times where we may be collecting the same data point from multiple CBM reports, and I know that's one of the things that Susan's group is taking a look at, ensuring that, although there's always going to be some need for duplication because you've got to have the student's name or ID number or something to tie it from one report to the other, to ensure that there's not unnecessary duplication.
And actually, we don't collect the same data point from multiple reports, other than the type of thing you just described. But what we are hoping to do through our IES grant, as we receive $2 million to help defer the cost for institutions reporting class rosters to us, we anticipate being able to significantly reduce some of the reporting requirements that come through that once, but Susan's not listening right now, but we think that we could potentially eliminate a couple of reports but we want to make sure from institutions that that's the easiest way for them to do it.
Yeah.
They might decide, maybe accept something higher. But that there may be some, they may suggest to us that it would be easier to continue part of those reports, but we're hopeful that we'll actually end up with more information, but less data being reported to us.
Fewer reporting structures.
But the data being given to us is more flexible, and that you have data on the individual students and performance rather than having a class here and you have to tease it out from here and something.
And we're hoping to go beyond that over the next year and a half that we've got before the next legislative session to not only look at the reporting, but also to look at the legislation and the statutes to evaluate, okay, are there some things that have gone by the wayside that we're no longer doing or that are no longer relevant, and can we eliminate those sections of the statute to be able to clean up some of the code and to also be able to clarify our true purpose and our true role in
That's very good.
in our activities. So.
Because one of the things that has to be on the list are reports that we require that we really don't do anything with. That's the way URRS was, but that's being taken to the next level, so things like that.
Yeah. Well, and then things that the legislature or different branches of government might require of us that it'd be interesting to look, and you may probably have already done this, see if you couldn't send in an existing report and say, you know, see section 5 of this already existing report instead of.
Well, that's very much a piece of what the Council of Chancellors and Presidents did a number of years ago. In fact, one of the first things I did when I came here, we put together a group to examine something like that, and we've had a difficult time over the years getting that piece worked out, which is important. For example, is it possible to somehow get the same information that we get in the faculty workload reports from another agency that collects all employment information? But they would have to make some modifications.
Yeah.
So there are a number of things that are like that, and the PUPC identified some of those, and Susan's staff did as well, and we just haven't been able to get agreement from other places.
So this whole statewide data consolidation thing doesn't make stuff like that easier.
No, it doesn't, and
Why would I think that?
and plus, you know, and one thing that isn't mentioned, if you looked at the first time the CPUPC did a report, a massive amount of the data really was data that wasn't even state data, it was federal data. So that they have multiple sites, and you should know that we modified our graduation rates at one time because of the feds adopted graduation rates. They hadn't had any, and we modified our definition to be in line with theirs. So we try to be flexible on our own end.
Yeah, of course you do. Okay, thank y'all. And agenda item 11 is a discussion of proposed rule changes resulting from the 81st Texas legislative session to be voted on at the July board meeting. And required report studies. Do we already know all of these?
Yes, ma'am.
We do.
And these have already been posted. Have they been posted yet? I think they may be posted starting this week. And so these items would not have been posted and had time for comment before they came to this committee.
Right.
So they will be going directly to the board, but there were items that needed to be acted upon as soon as possible in order to carry out the legislative obligations that we were placed under. And so starting with Chapter 4, you can see that it's based upon the university affiliate, ensuring that students aren't constructively limited to the university-affiliated bookstore, and that they are provided with information relating to the accessibility of their textbooks at other locations other than the university-affiliated bookstore. It's pretty straightforward. The statute lays out exactly what needs to be in rule, and we basically just incorporated it. Under B, Chapter 13, Subchapter L, the engineering summer program, basically we changed it from being a camp to being a program, and we're a little bit more explicit with respect to the institutions, but we also would allow the expansion to the private institutions, much as we did with the NHARP. This would also give private institutions with an engineering program the ability to participate in the summer program. C is Chapter 14, and Chapter 14 is changing the name on the Norm Hackerman to the Norm Hackerman in the research funding definitions, and then it's also to include the independent, the private or independent institutions into the Norm Hackerman program, as well as to require that the institutions had the undergraduate students at if they were a general academic institution, or graduate students if they were a health science center involved in the program, which was kind of the overall intent at one time, and has been included in the evaluation of all the proposals for NHARP, but now has been made part of the statutory requirements for it. The last section for rules that are being proposed is based upon the partnerships between secondary and public two-year institutions, and this is based upon dual credit courses and allowing community colleges the ability to go outside of their service area and into the service area of another community college to offer dual credit courses if the local community college does not provide it to the satisfaction of the school district. And that's a direct quote, to the satisfaction of the school district. So even if they offer it and if the school district is not satisfied and writes a letter to us at the coordinating board, then another community college could be invited in, and they have to be invited to do so. But the other community college can be invited in, and they can offer the course in another community college's service area. So it does make a significant change, and should be interesting to see how often it's implemented.
Yeah.
But that's the major issue in this last one. The other issue, there will be proposed rule for the October board meeting based upon SB 819, which requires notification of the meningitis vaccinations and to begin record keeping of whether or not a student has received the meningitis vaccinations. Those rules will be ready and to be posted in September for the AER September September committee meeting and the October board meeting. And then several of the studies that we have been required to do, the research expenditure study, which Kevin talked about, the feasibility study for the community college baccalaureate degree program, which I'm very sorry Lori missed talking about. And so she can come back and talk about it for our next meeting, but we will have a study to look at the feasibility of the expansion of the baccalaureate programs, which we're going to kind of piggyback on to the site review that we talked about previously, and should be getting that completed. The feasibility of a law school on the Mexico-Texas border, which was put into 956 and already discussed, and then the requirements for accreditation of the law school at UNT system in Dallas. So those are the main aspects of outstanding items. And Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Concludes the business of the Committee on Academic Excellence and Research. Anybody have any objection to adjournment? We are adjourned.
Yay.
Thank you, all staff. I'm sorry.